Okay, I'm going to ad lib a little test project here with the new microphone that I'm going to use for my documentary and just kind of narrate a little bit, a little compilation of uh, some of the various town hall meetings that I've been to that I believe have put me in front of some of the local political representatives, actually federal United States representatives and governors and uh, senators from the state of Oklahoma, and kind of narrate what my experience has been in that regard. Starting out here, it's going to be 2005 that I purchased a still camera and began going to town hall meetings. This is my United States Representative Tom Cole. I believe I'm not sure what our district was where I was at the time. I think it was District 3, encompassing Lawton, Oklahoma is seen here, Fort Sill, Halliburton. Later you'll see Tinker Air Force Base. This is the Oklahoma Base Retention Committee, BRAC Retention Committee meeting that I attended as well. And these kind of all tie in together. You'll see how I later on have had some goal in mind of if my constitutional rights were being violated, that I didn't believe that Oklahoma should benefit from the military assets and missions that it was benefiting from. As you'll read on this slide, there's some respect, duty, loyalty, freedom, some of those attributes that they wish to try to portray that they maintained that were consistent with military values. This is a Veterans Day dominoes game with then Governor Brad Henry, in 2005, Veterans Day. You know, it's one of those photo ops where they can kind of glad hand with veterans and making a photo op appearance that I kind of made inconvenient for him, I think. If my ordeal is reality, which I strongly believe that it is, and they actually, Governor Nye there on the right, he would have preferred that I didn't attend, if I recall. No, this is Veterans Day that same year. There's now Governor Mary Fallin. She was the lieutenant governor at the time, and she was going to run for representative that she had not yet taken the office for. But again, it was, you know, a photo op for them that you actually won't see those. It's almost sad because you won't see. It's almost more of a statement that you really won't see these politicians at Veterans Day events. Istook, he was the representative that Mary Fallin took the position of, I believe. Here's another town hall meeting. That would be 2006, I believe, in Norman with Tom Cole. I guess the point being is I'm in front of these people and I'm recording it in photographs, you know, that I have been present in front of them. And if my ordeal was reality, I wanted to make a record that I was right in front of them, and by, I guess, the assertion being that they weren't really truly living up to their oath of office and upholding the Constitution if they knew of my ordeal and they were refusing to take any action and seeking to provide oversight to the executive if it was coming from President Bush, possibly. This is another town hall meeting in Chickasha, Oklahoma. I think it was within that same time frame. And then this is Tom Coburn, Senator Tom Coburn, around that same time frame, 2006, I believe. He's talking about the earmarks, which I've joked that earmarks were so passé that exploiting your citizens was the new way to bring home the bacon to your state or district. And again, you know, the assertion being I was intimidated to some extent not to be too outspoken, but yet, you know, at least be present and make a record of my presence. here's a gubernatorial debate between Jerry Askins and Mary Fallin, who won the governorship.
Intrusion into our personal lives that I think has really given rise to some of the Tea Party movement in this country. People being concerned that their individual rights and their individual liberties are being infringed upon under the guise of trying to raise revenue. So it would be a hard sell for me to be able to say this would work. If the Oklahoma legislature passed it and could convince us that it doesn't infringe on individual rights, then it's something we could look at. Mary Fallin.
I don't think you ever should infringe upon our personal freedoms and our rights and our privacy just to raise revenue for the state of Oklahoma. I think the best way to raise revenue and to grow our economy is, once again, to focus on creating that very best business climate by keeping the cost of doing business low in the state of Oklahoma. And to that, it means, it means to me, to lower our workers' compensation costs in our state, to work on more tort reform in the state of Oklahoma, to raise our educational standards, to focus on some of our great industries of our state, such as the aerospace industry, such as our military and our defense industry, and the great jobs that they create. We're focusing on creating more energy in the state of Oklahoma. There's some great research being done with the University Multispectral Lab on unmanned aerial vehicles in cooperation with OSU. There's a lot of work being done with compressed natural gas and fleet management. And there are all kinds of ways to boost industry and to boost jobs in our state. But first of all, we got to create that very best business climate possible, have the educated.
Okay, so here is my former United States representative from the district that I lived in during the majority of the ordeal that I've referenced. I'm making a documentary pertaining to United States Representative Tom Cole. And he's speaking in Norman, Oklahoma on this town hall meeting. Like I said, this was last year, 2011. The big topic of the day was the budget deficits and a lot of questions and comments about means to either cut the budget or how to increase revenues. And in context, there's the Natural Gas Act that's is being proposed that's going to provide these tax credits that will basically have the taxpayers fund the infrastructure for the natural gas industry's expansion into transportation. And there'll be some comments as well about how the military has benefited the state of Oklahoma, and it's interesting to listen to the comments that I've selected here.
And take this state, for instance. We have about 70,000 oil wells in Oklahoma. Over 60,000 of them are stripper wells that are producing less than 10 barrels or less, a year. That's the kind of production that starts falling into risk. A few weeks ago, I spent 2 days visiting businesses, little businesses all across the southern end of this district. I mean, I was in Davis, I was in Duncan. These are little machine shops, places that are producing valves, pipe, and they are humming. I mean, the unemployment rate in our state, we're very lucky, is about 5.3%. Some of these counties, it's below 5%. You ask them what their problems are, the number one is we can't get enough people. Can't get enough people. You want to think twice about if you have tax policy that changes that and costs jobs and economic activity, particularly in Oklahoma. So,
but you should also remember what Dwight David Eisenhower said: beware of the military-industrial complex.
I do. Actually, I'm a big fan of Eisenhower's and trying to confuse it. But remember, defense spending, when he was president, was 50% of the national budget in 1960. It's 18 now. And it was 9% of the national wealth. It's less than 5 years. So relative to its time, American military is actually smaller today than it's been any time since 1940 as a percentage of both the federal budget and as a percentage of the national wealth. Anyway, I spent a lot of time. I'm going to give you guys 2 questions.
The other deal is that when you're talking about oil and gas companies, now I'm not trying to demonize oil and gas companies, but we're talking about also the domestic manufacturing deduction for oil and gas companies. Senator Bob Corpus said that deduction was never intended for capital-intensive companies like oil and gas companies. The other thing is the use of the LIFO inventory method of accounting, which artificially inflates their cost of goods sold. Now, these items are adding up anywhere from $50 to $120 billion that's available to reduce the debt deficit over a 10-year period, if we would just make changes. But however, some members of our Congress will say, wait, I've signed a pledge not to increase taxes, but then will not eliminate these tax loopholes. Now, finally, the question is when are you going to close these tax loopholes? Finally, I'd just like to add one point.
In terms of the oil and gas industry, first of all, royalties paid to a foreign government are taxes. They own it and they tax you. So saying that that's somehow not a tax, I would disagree with. It certainly is. When we pay severance taxes here, oil companies to the Oklahoma State government, that's a tax. And severance taxes over there, however you want to call them, payment to a government is purely a tax. It's not a fee for a service rendered. I have never taken a place that I wouldn't look at loopholes. Like if you vote for the Ryan budget, you actually voted to eliminate a lot of loopholes. I think you're exactly right about that. That is actually probably the place where there can be some bipartisan consensus. You may even see some of it in this joint committee. I don't know, but over the next years, I suspect that that will happen. Now, always remember, somebody's quote loophole is somebody else's legitimate deduction. You probably own a home. You probably got it with a loophole called a mortgage tax credit. That's actually the largest single tax deduction in the tax code. And most of the deductions that go are for purposes we decided, we want to encourage that activity. We think you owning your home is a stimulant to the economy, good social value, people to own usually take care of their property better. We like the stability that goes with that. We think you owning an asset that you can carry with you as you age is probably a good thing and will save the government money over time. So each one of these things has some sort of explanation or some sort of reason. When I object, I'm going to look at the energy company or anybody else's quote tax credit. But if I see a set that I think are going to cost thousands of Oklahomans their jobs, I'm not going to be for that.
And here's another town hall meeting with my current U.S. Representative James Langford from the Oklahoma City metro area and district surrounding. Some of the same issues and some of the concerns that the constituents have might not be engender a great deal of sympathy from other communities that are suffering high unemployment rates. So I picked out a few interesting clips from that meeting.
One other thing I want to be able to mention to you on it. There have been a lot of comments that say, why don't we just raise taxes and that'll solve this? Here's our problem. In the next 10 years, our deficit is forecast to be about $1 trillion a year. The proposal the president has put on the table in increasing taxes will get us about $1 trillion over the next 10 years, and it's high end. That's the oil company one, that's the corporate jet one, that's the release of the Bush tax cut one. You put all those together, you're approaching $100 billion a year. So you've got a $1 trillion solution for a $10 trillion problem. It does not get you there. So if there's a perception, if we just raise taxes, it'll solve this, I'm telling you, it will not solve this. We have bigger issues than that. And so we've got to start working through the process of how do we get into this? Or how do we get out of it? I know how we get in it. We're there. Okay, credit, and we try to doctor the economy based on all these different credits and exceptions on that. That is not how you run a free market enterprise. Okay, that is not Adam Smith's invisible hand. That is the regulator's visible hand. Okay, so we've got to be able to pull out of that. That is the broadening the base part of this, trying to figure out how to be able to pull away from those. That is considered raising taxes to some people. Most people that we would look at and go, that's not raising taxes, that's killing a subsidy. I would agree on that. But some people are going to push back and say, but that's raising taxes because you took away that tax credit, so that does increase taxes on that. I would just disagree with that entirely. We need to be able to allow ethanol to be able to rise and fall on its own. Ethanol has been around a long time. It is not a new fuel. It's not experimental. There are plenty of manufacturing around. It has got to be able to rise and fall on its own. And it is very unique for us in our alternative fuels. That is both required to be there. We heavily subsidize it at every level of production. There are serious issues with the efficiency of ethanol, and when you start looking at environmental issues on it, the amount of water that it takes to produce ethanol is dramatic. So we're swapping air for water in the functioning of ethanol, and so we've got some issues with that as well.
So you think that the tax, I mean, the subsidy will end at the end of the year then, or?
I do think that's going to end.
Okay.
I do. Okay, I'm going to try to make sure I'm.
Because see, there's $9 billion we got right there.
That's only 6. We have to keep going.
6 billion, 6
If you feel like we're at an auction, I'll take 12. Got 5. Guy Peters. Where's Guy?
Hello, sir.
Guy Peters. There you are. Finally, I got off the same road. So, not that there's anything wrong with that road, but yes, sir.
Same road. I'm a current product of Oklahoma's unemployment.
That stinks.
After
They're bringing occupancy right there.
Current product of Oklahoma's unemployment. Been looking for a job for the past 4 years, but what I'm coming to find out is that the living wage for employment these days really sucks. And after 8 years of a prosperous last company, I was able to afford my own home, afford my own life. And right now, I'm asking for a home mortgage remodification. And, you know, it's tough. What are we going to do to support a living wage in Oklahoma? We make most about our Oklahoma unemployment, but it's shadowed by the living wage that really sucks in Oklahoma.
What industry are you in as far as specialization or background?
Call center sales.
Okay, there you go. I would say this to you as well, and by the way, if there's any employers that are here that are looking, there's one looking the other direction on it. And so, Guy. Trying to figure out how to give you a real answer to this, because that's not a simple, I mean, you know, that's not a simple question. One of the hardest things that I think we've become as a culture is looking towards Washington, D.C. to be able to solve every single issue. Because the more you look at Washington, D.C. to solve the problems, the more disappointed you're going to be, I promise. Because we can't solve everything on that. This is a worldwide downturn in the economy. What we're experiencing in Oklahoma is nothing compared to what's happening in Detroit, or nothing to what's happening currently in Italy, or Greece, or Portugal, or Spain, or multiple other countries. But it doesn't change the reality for you and what's going on. I understand that. Can we talk later? Sure. And let's get a chance to visit on some specifics, because I don't want to just give you a flippant answer. And let's get a chance to visit on that. Because in Oklahoma City, we have, at the highest area, we've had about 5.7 unemployment. Most of the rest of the country would love to be Oklahoma City and our unemployment. We have a very diverse economy that's sustaining a lot of that. But it doesn't matter if you're still the one unemployed.
Of those that are employed, the living wage, I mean, you know, what do you consider living wage in Oklahoma, you know? I mean, you know.
That depends on what your needs are, yeah.
All the jobs that I have found out that I've been trying to get and everything want to pay me below $11 an hour and give me no insurance for 6 months. I want to live.
Right.
I want to live prosperously.
I understand that. I do understand.
And here's a town hall meeting, obviously August 18th, 2011, with U.S. Senator Tom Coburn, and picked out a few clips here that may highlight a few hypocrisies, I believe, with support for, you know, subsidies that favor industry that Oklahoma enjoys, but bashing other subsidies for other industries. And maybe there's another hypocrisy or two that's included in here that I highlighted in the clips I selected.
Hi, Dr. Coburn. Hello. Thanks for all the work you and your staff has done to identify all the wasteful spending. I think it's tremendous. I wish they would just cut that all the way across the board. I hate to sound like a broken record, but I had the opportunity this summer to work on a documentary about natural gas, about Robert Hefner. I brought his book tonight, Grand Energy Transition. $500 billion a year we send overseas to countries that don't really like us that much. It's time that we bring that to an end, that energy independence has got to be one of our top priorities. And I ask that the Senate, the House takes up a bill to expedite the transition to gas, hydrogen, and those types of fuels. A simple piece of legislation to make all cars dual fuel would expedite that so much. In the 1980s, the Congress defeated or passed legislation that stopped the transition to natural gas, and I think it's time that we push forward.
So I have some challenge with you with that, and let me tell you, my gray hair now tells me you don't want Washington deciding what fuel we're going to use, and what miles per gallon you're going to get. What really works, it's not perfect, but what really works is markets to allocate a scarce resource. For natural gas, where you didn't have the EPA, the minimum cost is at least $4,800 if you follow what some idiot bureaucrat in Washington has decided has to happen for a conversion. And you can fill your car at home with natural gas. The market would supply filling stations everywhere else. What is out there now is they want government to give more tax credits to this, to this, to this, and this to do it. Let the markets work, but let's have a real market. And let's pull back the regulations so we can have that. You know, it's interesting, the article published this week, you hear, most people get kind of angry when gas gets at $4. Anybody here? And we tend to misdirect our anger at the oil company.
Yeah.
You realize that the oil industry, both in this country and outside, but those based in this country pay the top rate of income taxes of all the Standard & Poor's 500. 41.5%. That's what they pay. And if you look at all the tax breaks for energy, oil and gas gets 8%. 92% of all the tax breaks go to solar, wind, and ethanol. So when you hear, the next time you hear the president go after the oil and gas industry, he needs to actually look in the mirror and say, well, if we're going to take all that away, and by the way, the oil and gas industry doesn't get a tax credit. They get an accelerated depreciation, which means over the long run, they pay exactly the same amount of taxes. They just pay it later. Versus the other industries that get tax credits. Why do you think GE paid no income tax this year? Because they got tax credits for wind energy. So here's a very successful corporation in the United States who paid zero income taxes because in our wisdom in Washington, we decided to give a tax credit for wind energy, which is a highly inefficient way to supply energy. Even in Oklahoma, it's not an efficient way. So what I would tell you is I'm all for letting markets work and let the market decide. And the reason we have all this up and down isn't because of the big oil companies. The biggest reason that oil prices shot up, there's two. One was called Libya, and that counts for $15 a barrel. The other is the declining value of the dollar. And why is the dollar going down? Because we won't live within our means. And so there's why oil got over 100, it got to 115. I think it ended up at 84 today or something like that.
As you can see in this article I pulled off the internet, Senator Coburn did actually vote for the Nat Gas Act, the Senate version that failed last week. So, a bit of a contradiction to what he had said in that town hall meeting last summer.
What I will promise you is I will use every parliamentary trick I can to protect the Second Amendment every time, every day, every week. And the 10th Amendment. And every other one. I told Harry Reid on Guns in the Park, I said, Harry, you're going to get this vote, whether you want it or not. You may not know now that you've blocked me several times from getting the vote, you're going to get it. I promise you you're going to get it. So he now understands when he keeps me from getting a vote, he's still going to give us the vote because I'm going to figure out a way. And I actually, other than Robert Byrd and a couple others, I've now studied and have staff that have studied the rule. We know where the holes are. And I'm going to put things in. just like ethanol, get rid of the VTEC. He said, you can't have the vote. I said, we're going to have the vote. And then what he did is he voted against it, and then he had it gone under Senator Feinstein, and we voted for it. So the point is you can never doubt my loyalty to the U.S. Constitution when it comes to the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, or the 10th Amendment. I will never.
It looks as though he looks right straight at me after he makes those statements about his support for the Constitution. And that's kind of a fitting sentiment that leads into these last clips with another town hall meeting with Tom Cole. And he's speaking about the huge boon to the economy that the last BRAC round had for the state of Oklahoma, for his district in particular. And this particular constituent that's about to pose a question has complaints about some costs that are incurred, no property taxes for Tinker Air Force Base, I believe is whatever the reference is that he makes. And Tom Cole is assuring him that the state of Oklahoma does very well in terms of return on federal tax dollars put into the system. So it's kind of interesting just how unappreciative these people from Oklahoma are. And I think people shouldn't realize, these attitudes that the people of Oklahoma have, that, from my stance, they're unappreciative, in regard to honoring the Constitution and those protections of freedoms and liberties. But obviously there's some other aspects that they're not appreciative of as well. It might be represented in their statements to the representatives here.
Impact funding. It's been
I'm going to give you one more.
One more.
You've had one.
No.
Way too much. No, I told him one more.
One more. Impact funding. It's been 36 years since it was fully funded. I mean, this year.
But you're for balancing the budget and getting the government out of education.
Yeah, I am. I mean, but let Tinker pay its fair share of property taxes. I mean, it's not right that Cleveland County is Tinker is the single largest employer in Cleveland County, and yet Middale Schools takes 100% of the
Tinker's
losses.
in Oklahoma County, not in Cleveland County.
That's what I'm saying. But the single largest employer in Cleveland County is Tinker.
No, it's actually the University of Oklahoma.
Employer.
Well, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yet the school districts in Cleveland County have no losses involved because of that.
Sure they do. They're educating those kids.
Yes, but they're paying property taxes.
They're only paying property tax on their home.
That's right.
The employer's not paying property tax.
That's right, but the homes of the people in Cleveland County are paying property taxes.
Well, the homes of the people that you're educating here in Middale, most of them are paying property taxes.
Not the ones on Tinker.
Well, there's not that, as a percentage of your, look, on balance, Oklahoma gets back, you got to decide which side of this argument you want to be on. Oklahoma gets back $2 roughly for every dollar it pays in federal taxes.
That's right.
And it's 5 great military facilities, 39 Indian tribes, the farm programs, the biggest thing is Social Security just transfer payments back to individuals. But we work very hard to try and get these things up, but not everybody in the country gets impact aid. And they're looking at this and saying, if you're in Iowa where there's not a single military base, you're saying, why is Oklahoma getting all this federal money? Why is Oklahoma one of the top 15 states in terms of return per capita of federal dollars versus what they actually pay in the federal treasury? I can point out a lot of areas where we're shortchanged. We don't get back what we pay in gasoline taxes. We're a donor state there. But overall, Oklahoma is an enormous importer of federal dollars. And so to say on the one hand, we're not getting what we deserve from the federal government, but we sure like having Tinker Air Force Base and all that employment that it generates. And it's not just private. Do you really think Boeing would be in Midwest City if Tinker Air Force Base were not here? Or Air Inc. Or just go around the perimeter and see how many private employers you have here that are paying property taxes, thanks to the fact that you have Tinker Air Force. I don't have a place in my district that wouldn't be ecstatic to take Tinker Air Force Base and say, that's fine, good luck, guys. You won't have to worry about those kids, we'll educate. You know, in Lawton, they fight these same, when they got Fort Sill down there, it's a lot bigger than Tinker, 100,000 acres off the property tax roll. Guess who had the second highest personal income growth in America last year? Lawton, Oklahoma. Why? $1.5 billion worth of federal investment in BRAC, moving the Air Defense Artillery School up and increasing the size. Now, are they bursting at the seams? Do they have school problems? Absolutely. And major problems. And we try and work with them on that. But at the end of the day, you're usually better off having these kinds of facilities close by. Most communities would die to have what you got in Tinker Air Force Base. And they would deal with the other problems.